In this video, General Ben Hodges discusses the current situation in Ukraine and provides his analysis on various aspects of the conflict. Here is a comprehensive analysis of what he is saying. Number 1. Momentum and optimism. General Hodges starts by stating that the momentum has shifted in favor of Ukraine. He mentions that Ukrainians are preparing for a counteroffensive and that countries like the UK and Germany are showing support by providing resources to Ukraine. He expresses optimism about the future and highlights the consistent negative news for the Russian side. Number 2. Incursions into Russia. General Hodges discusses the recent incursions into Russia's Belgorod region by the International Legion in Ukraine. He presents multiple explanations for these actions. One possibility is that the incursions involve Russian fighters supporting the Ukrainian cause or fighting for their own agenda. He suggests a potential connection with Ukrainian intelligence but admits uncertainty regarding the exact nature of these incursions.
And recently this week we've seen a new development. It is incursions into Russia itself in the Belgorod region. This is forces for the International Legion in Ukraine. What do you make of this exactly?
This is very interesting because there's 3 or 4 plausible explanations of what happened. Clearly, looking at the pictures of the aftermath, the Russians staged something to make it look like they had destroyed the entire incursion, but it didn't take.
Because these are Russian fighters fighting for the Ukrainian cause, but also to topple Ukraine.
Or else they are taking advantage of an opportunity fighting for their own cause. I would imagine that there is some connection with Ukrainian intelligence or something like that, but I can't tell for sure. And other than the distraction it causes for the Russian side, why would the Ukrainians do it? I see benefit for the Ukrainians, but I don't know for a fact that they have directed this.
Number 3. Significance of the incursions. Regarding the significance of the incursions, General Hodges believes it depends on how seriously Russia perceives them. If Russia views them as a genuine distraction, they may redirect resources from other areas to strengthen their border. He sees this as a positive outcome for Ukraine, since it diverts Russian attention away from where Ukraine's main effort will likely be focused.
We're talking about the Freedom of Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps. How seriously should they be taken, do you think?
Well, it kind of depends on the Russian reaction. If the Russians take it very seriously, that this is a real distraction for them, and if they have to start pulling resources from somewhere else to strengthen their own border, I think this is a good thing because it takes them away from where I think Ukraine's main effort is going to be.
Number 4. Ukrainian support for incursions. General Hodges discusses the involvement of Ukraine in supporting these incursions. He acknowledges the difficulty of determining Ukraine's level of involvement and speculates that there may be individuals or groups within Russia who sympathize with the Ukrainian cause and acquire weapons and equipment independently. He cites examples of Belarusians and Russians fighting for Ukraine and suggests that the incursions may be connected to this broader phenomenon.
And how much do you think Ukraine is behind them? Did they supply the weapons, for example?
Again, hard to say. I mean, we should keep in mind that Russia, particularly on the frontiers of Russia, is not like Moscow. I mean, the control of the government extends not 100% to every little village in town. So it's not inconceivable that you could have people who are not pro-Kremlin that are Russian that would be able to get their hands on equipment, weapons, uniforms, things like that. Of course, there are soldiers from Belarus or people from Belarus who are fighting for Ukraine. There are Russians who are fighting for Ukraine. This seems like some sort of aspect of that.
Number 5. Distraction and escalation. When asked about the potential escalation resulting from the incursions, General Hodges views them primarily as a distraction for the Kremlin. He believes the incursions create problems for Russia and make it more challenging for them to mass their forces against Ukraine. Therefore, he sees the incursions as beneficial for Ukraine's overall strategy.
So at the moment, do you see this more as a distraction rather than something that's going to lead to some kind of escalation?
Yes, I think this is a distraction that causes problems for the Kremlin. And of course, they have to explain it. And if this makes it more difficult for Russia to mass against Ukrainian forces, then I think it's a good thing.
Number 6. War crimes and accountability. General Hodges condemns the targeting of medical clinics in Dnipro by Russia, stating that it constitutes a war crime. He mentions the use of precision weapons, implying that these attacks are deliberate rather than accidental. He suggests that one effective way to pressure Russia is to publicly expose the chain of command responsible for these actions, from the Kremlin down to the soldiers executing the attacks.
There are reports today that Russia has launched an attack on a medical clinic in Dnipro. This may well turn out to be a war crime. How optimistic are you that the people who've committed war crimes are going to be held to account and brought to justice?
Yeah, well, of course, 100% it is a war crime to target hospitals. And you know, these are precision weapons that are being used, so these are not accidents. And there's been a pattern of going after medical facilities as well as other civilian infrastructure. I think that one of the things we should be doing is posting with the Times, for example, the pictures of the entire chain of command, everybody that has a role to play from the Kremlin on down to the captain that's responsible for the battery that launches the rocket or the missile. This is who they are, because I think this will be one of the most effective ways to start putting pressure on Russians when they realize they cannot do this with impunity.
Number 7. Advocacy for justice. General Hodges highlights the work of the NGO Human Rights First, which is advocating for changes in U.S. policy to facilitate the prosecution of war criminals. He supports the idea of the U.S. joining the International Criminal Court, ICC, and urges the U.S. Secretary of Defense to support the ICC's collection of evidence for war crimes. He emphasizes the need for accountability and believes the U.S. should live up to its own talking points by signing the Rome Statute, which grants jurisdiction to the ICC.
And indeed, the NGO you advise, Human Rights First, is working in Ukraine and is advocating for changes to US policy to make it more easy to bring people to justice. Isn't it time for the US to join the International Criminal Court and support it?
Absolutely. I just penned a opinion piece that was published in Washington, D.C. the other day, along with two former Supreme Allied Commanders of Europe, General Breedlove and General Wes Clark, advocating for at least our Secretary of Defense should support the ICC, the International Criminal Court, in the collection of evidence, so to help them collect evidence of these war crimes. And I hope that our government will decide it is time that we need to be a signatory to the Rome Statute, which gives that jurisdiction. We have to live up to our own talking points.